So, today I want to talk about and highlight the struggles of the Chicago Teachers Union in their negotiations with the Chicago Public School System and Mayor Lori Lightfoot over the reopening of schools. Now, the teachers union has essentially come out with the perspective that schools should not be reopened, without proper protection and everything in place. Furthermore, it's seeming like Lori Lightfoot, the mayor, doesn't seem to be completely in good faith with negotiations. So I do want to talk about all that and the importance of why the schools shouldn't be open anytime soon. But before I do, I need to remind people that this is a pandemic, that this is a situation in which lives are at risk every time you open up a public facility. It doesn't matter if schools have been deemed slightly safer or not. The fact of the matter is, they are still a public gathering space, and a lot of the tools needed to keep people at, a distance from each other, to keep people and personnel and students 6 feet away from each other and enforce that. When you've had this situation going on now for almost a year, and there's been no effort across the country to work towards reducing class sizes, increasing ventilation, offering rapid testing, and, when the rates of COVID spreading have been as high as they've been as of late, something feels wrong about the idea of opening all of these schools. And that's also true when, in Georgia, you just had a situation where two teachers died of COVID within 24 hours of each other from the same Georgia school district. So this is killing off teachers. We might be comfortable with some of the percentages when they're statistics, but when we actually put faces and names to things and we acknowledge that every person and every number is a human life that's being lost, it's a lot harder to accept those losses. And this is a problem across the country when it comes to opening schools. The Biden administration has backed up the position that we should, get everything open within the first 100 days of his presidency. And honestly, I don't see what the rush is. I really don't. And to me, it just rings of a lot of misunderstanding of who opening schools will benefit, why it's, being done, and for whom. Like, because in a lot of ways, it feels like it's being done not to give children a proper education, because if that was the issue, schools would have already been improved across the board years ago. Funding wouldn't have been cut from schools years ago. It just feels like in order to open the economy, a lot of workers need to have themselves freed from their children, and you need to get people out there. And that's not to dismiss educators at all across, the country. Educators do a fine job for the most part, right? Like, you need to acknowledge that teachers are out there trying to give students an education and to try to get them to critically think. But it is not in the best interest of the country right now to manage that in a way that is safe for human lives. Again, it's about economy first over everything else. And so then you move into the realization that as of December 29th, 2 million children have caught COVID-19 in the country. That over 2 million children have COVID. That's intense. That's an intense number to hear that there are 2 million children cases in the country. There's no way else to spin that or to make it, palatable. That's a lot of children who may grow up with medical conditions, as we're finding out more and more that the disease can cause long-term and lasting effects, and we don't know the full extent of that. And there's new strains of the virus coming out, and there's new strains of everything coming out. And it just feels like we're sending children off to die by sending them to school. We're sending teachers off to die by sending them to these schools in person. And the thing is also, you need to keep into account is that as of September, we had reports that of the children who were dying, 78% were children of color, 45% were Hispanic, 29% were Black, and 4% were non-Hispanic American Indian or Alaskan Native. Children who are dying from this seem to be disproportionately people of color. And when we look at the story of why Black families are choosing to keep their kids remote and not send them to school, We have to also keep in mind that the trend could become national as communities of color continue to be the hardest hit by the disease. Due to existing social inequalities that influence health outcomes like food insecurity, affordable housing, education, access to healthcare, Black Americans are more likely to have pre existing health challenges such as diabetes and hypertension that put them at risk for more COVID-19 complications. 1/3 of the Black respondents to a Washington Post poll said they personally knew someone who died from the virus, compared to 17% of Hispanic adults and 9% of white adults. This is overwhelmingly affecting Black populations. And the fact of the matter is in the United States, the issues around healthcare inequality and why we need something like, Medicare for all and actual proper healthcare is very tied to the racial issue in the United States. When we look at things like food insecurity, affordable housing, education, access to healthcare, overwhelmingly it's people of color and specifically Black lives who do not get access to these things. And if you are not in support of that, of those things happening, that's part of the Black Lives Movement. You need to be in support of that. And I don't think sending a bunch of Black and brown children to school systems that are reopening is going to fix it. And with the class disparity in place, we also have to acknowledge that a lot of white kids can afford to go to other institutions that might be able to open and do things in more private settings, whether they be charter or full-blown private schools, whereas, children of color might be funneled into the public education system. And so there's really a question about who's benefiting from all this. Because it doesn't seem to be that people of color especially are benefiting in any way from any of the pandemic response. And so we could sit here and we could talk about how important the 2K checks are, because they are, and we could talk about all the other things, and we need to talk about this union. But if you're not examining the on-the-ground situations for why this is a problem and why we shouldn't be opening these schools and why it is people of color's lives are again ready to be sacrificed by this country, then, I don't know what to say to you. We need to be calling all this into question. We need to be taking care of people of color's lives because they're human lives, because we value them, because Black lives do matter. And that just needs to be said. So when we look at the story of what's going on in Chicago, you're combining this pandemic situation with a union struggle, where the union is fighting on behalf of teachers, and I'd argue students as well, based on everything else I've said, in order to try to secure a safe situation for schools to potentially open at some point. So I just want to show off some of the demands going on in here. So the bargaining movement, the CTU is the teachers union, and the CPS is the Chicago Public Schools. If you look at what they want, the teachers union wants a below 3% positivity rate. Meanwhile, the position of the public schools coming in was no rules for opening the district. And if you look down the list, vaccines, they want all staff to be offered fully vaccinated before being required to come in person. No plan. Telework for all staff. Well, telework for some staff in high-risk categories. Baseline testing. Test all staff every week. Test students in 40 schools with the highest neighborhood rates. No plan. And, the compromises are going to either be at the point that the union wants, or more typically a compromise between these two. But you can see how the public school system has no plan, and wanted to open up. And so without the union support behind them, they would not have been able to, the teachers would not have been able to stand up against this. And so even still, they're not getting all their demands. There's still plenty of things that have no plan available. There's plenty of things where, the compromises kind of seem inadequate as far as I'm concerned. Because I don't think any of the demands by the union about needing the staff vaccinated or properly accommodated or properly tested or having proper ventilation systems up to code and standard are that ridiculous. When we can go test athletes to the level that we've tested them so we can keep the Super Bowl functioning, we can take the time out to make sure teachers are properly tested. we don't have funding for this. I'm sorry, but like I've said before on this channel, take it from the defense spending budget. This is to protect American lives. If you need to spin it as a defense issue, then spin it as the defense issue that it is. We are vulnerable in this case. And if that's what it takes to get conservatives on board, I am willing to sacrifice that particular aspect of principle in order to get stuff done. Because we need lives saved. Because people are dying. Because things are going wrong. And they will continue to go wrong. And the thing that I'm also fearing in terms of the pandemic is we're at a place where we're not sure if this new strain that's come out of South Africa in particular is going to be affected by the vaccine. So this could all be for nothing because people who, don't want to wear masks and are too worried about their own personal selfish freedoms are ruining it for everyone else. And it's not overwhelmingly the people who are not wearing masks, that we see on the news when we see white people without masks that are the ones affected. It's constantly people of color because they're the ones who were doing the essential work jobs for the most part across the country. You saw it in the union in New York, and you're seeing it here as well, and you're seeing it in every single situation. There's a problem in this country. There's a white supremacy problem, there's a race problem, and this all needs to be addressed and taken care of. And so, even with having a black mayor, that doesn't make it right, because she is still protecting the interests of a lot of the white business class in the country. And so, the negotiations were supposedly going pretty well through all of this, but, right near the end of negotiations, with the desire to try to come to some terms, like I showed off, the mayor stepped in, Mayor Lightfoot, and basically said, you know what? Oh, all the teachers got to report Monday. End of story. We expect those teachers to be there for their students. If teachers do not show up, Lightfoot said the district will have to take some action, though she did not specify what that action would be. None of us want to go there, and we shouldn't have to, Lightfoot said. We reached a comprehensive agreement that pays teachers well and brought more equity into our schools just in 2019. Well, why are we here again? Why do you think we're here? Because we're in a pandemic and everything changed. The rules that we applied in 2019 don't apply anymore. I'm sorry, if you're labor and you had a contract that, went through this time, you should have been able to renegotiate. You should have been able to say, these terms changed, because my workers are now putting their lives on the line that much more. And I will back unions in that regard, and I will back any situation that says you have the right to go on strike or protect your workers, even within the middle of a contract. Because the ground's changed. The situation on the ground completely changed. That's like saying, oh, I established an agreement for us to do all this stuff within a factory job, right? And then they decided to bring in new machinery into the job that makes the job 10 times more dangerous. And you were, as a union, were to say, well, you know what? Well, we are in a contract. So, it's not fair of us to fight it after. No, the ground's changed. The business changed the agreement. And in this case, I get that the business isn't the one who changed the agreement, but the schools have to acknowledge that the on-the-ground conditions changed from something outside of everybody's control. So I think Mayor Lightfoot is just being completely disingenuous here. She has to know. She has to know the fact that this is a pandemic situation. And, this vague threat that's being thrown out, this idea that the teachers need to be there or we're going to take further action. What is she going to do? If the teachers are still continuing to teach remote without any agreement set in place, without anything out there, how is it that they're going to, what are they going to do? Are they going to dock people's pay? Because that's wage theft. The current agreement is that they can teach remotely. Until you come to a new standard, until you come to a new agreement on all of this, there is no way to justify any, attacks on the teachers. And to tell students that they should show up when the teachers might not be there, to tell students that they have to come into the building when teachers may not be there is going to make things more dangerous. Because again, you don't have the staffing to keep people 6 feet apart. You don't have this in place. And that's like what I don't think a lot of people realize about the education system across the board is that the schools were already crowded in cities. The schools are already a problem. They're already underfunded. And now you're trying to create this scenario where you're trying to open them back up in a pandemic when you've got rates way above 3% in terms of, COVID infection rates. And this is just supposed to be safe, and we're supposed to just accept that a certain amount of children are going to get sick. They might get sick for the rest of their lives, and that overwhelmingly the children who are going to get sick are going to be people of color. This is ridiculous. We need to stop trying to push these schools open right away. Maybe we take a pause and we accept the fact that not everybody has to be on the same exact schedule in terms of where they are in life. And maybe we just try to work around the reality that we're in, because this is not addressing the material conditions that we're living in. And this is an appeal to systems and structures rather than the ideas they were meant to deal with in the first place. So with that said, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button and bell for notifications. You can follow me on Twitter and check out my Discord in the description down below. My name is Anarchist Tara, and I hope you enjoyed watching.